I thought I knew what trust meant until I found the hidden cameras in our bedroom. My mother-in-law Eleanor had been house-sitting while Daniel and I celebrated our 5th anniversary in Maui, a much-needed vacation after years of renovation stress and fertility treatments. When I discovered her betrayal, I was devastated. But it was nothing compared to what I found on her phone when I confronted her. Photos that would tear our family apart and ultimately force Eleanor to flee Lakeside. Altogether, trust isn't just given, it's earned. And once broken, the shards can cut deeper than you ever imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through our bedroom curtains as I dusted the bookshelf, my weekend ritual despite Daniel teasing me about my cleaning obsession. The dust will still be there next weekend. "Jess," he'd say with that crooked smile I fell in love with 8 years ago at Rachel's bookstore opening. I was reaching to adjust the vintage clock Daniel's father had given us as a wedding present when something caught my eye. A tiny glint of light from behind the decorative bird figurine I'd picked up during our trip to Seattle. Curious, I moved the figurine and froze. A small black device no larger than a quarter sat nestled against the wall. At first, I thought it might be some kind of electronic component Daniel had left there. He was always tinkering with smart home gadgets. But as I examined it closer, my stomach dropped. A miniature camera lens stared back at me, positioned perfectly to capture our entire bedroom. My hands trembled as I carefully removed the device. Who would do this? Why? Daniel and I were ordinary, people living ordinary lives in our modest lakeside home. We weren't wealthy or important. I was just an elementary school teacher, and Daniel designed software for a company in Portland. It made no sense. Then I remembered. Eleanor, Daniel's mother, had stayed at our house the previous week while we were in Maui. She'd insisted on house-sitting rather than having us hire a service. "Why pay strangers when family can help?" she'd said with that tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. I had been grateful then. Now, a cold dread spread through me. I needed to be sure before jumping to conclusions. With renewed purpose, I began searching the room methodically. Behind the TV mounted on our wall, I found a second camera. A third was disguised as a USB wall charger in our bathroom, all strategically placed to capture our most private moments. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Meeting running late, home by 7, love you." I stared at the message, wondering how to even begin telling him what I'd discovered. His relationship with his mother had always been complicated. Eleanor had raised him alone after his father died when Daniel was just 10 years old. She was both mother and father, a fact she never let either of us forget. "I sacrificed everything for him," she would remind me during our tense family dinners. Everything. I called Rachel instead. She'd been my rock since college, the one person who always gave me honest advice without judgment. "Are you absolutely sure it's her?" Rachel asked after I explained my discovery, her voice calm despite the bombshell I'd just dropped. Who else could it be? She was the only one with access to our house. "But cameras? That's beyond invasive, Jess. That's criminal." "I know," I whispered, tears finally breaking through as the violation hit me fully. "What do I do? If I tell Daniel, it will destroy him." "If you don't tell Daniel, it will destroy you," Rachel countered. "But first, you need irrefutable proof it was Eleanor. No accusations without evidence." She was right. Daniel adored his mother despite their complicated relationship. He would need undeniable proof before believing she could do something so egregious. "I need to check the rest of the house," I said, already dreading what else I might find. "Want me to come over?" Rachel offered. "You shouldn't be alone for this." I glanced at the clock. It was just past noon. "Please. And can you bring those mini electromagnetic detectors you bought when you thought your ex was spying on you?" Rachel laughed softly. My paranoia finally comes in handy. By the time Rachel arrived 40 minutes later, I had found 2 more. Cameras, one in the living room bookshelf and another in the kitchen disguised as a smoke detector. Each discovery felt like another knife twisting in my gut. Our home, our sanctuary, had been violated in the most intimate way possible. Rachel walked through the door carrying her purse and a small shopping bag. Her expression was a mixture of concern and barely contained fury. "Where are they?" she asked. No preamble necessary between old friends. I showed her the 5 devices I'd collected, lined up on the kitchen island like twisted trophies. Rachel pulled out a small black device from her bag. "Let's make sure we've found them all." The electromagnetic detector would identify any additional cameras by picking up their transmission signals. We spent the next hour sweeping every room. Rachel's detector revealed one final camera hidden in the guest bedroom ventilation grate, the room where Eleanor had stayed during her visit. That one made no sense. Why would she record herself? Unless it was already there before she arrived, Rachel suggested, voicing my unspoken fear. How long could these have been here, Jess? The question made me lightheaded. I sank onto the edge of the bed. I don't know. Rachel sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. We need to find out who these transmit to. Each camera sends its feed somewhere. How do we do that? I know someone, Rachel said. He works in cybersecurity. He might be able to trace the signal. 2 hours later, Rachel's friend Alex confirmed what I already suspected. The cameras were linked to a mobile phone app. What we hadn't expected was his next revelation. Based on the transmission pattern, they were installed very recently, Alex explained over speakerphone, probably within the last week. And they're not sophisticated enough to store much data. They stream directly to a device that needs to be within about a quarter-mile radius to receive the feed. So, whoever is watching needed to be nearby, Rachel translated, looking at me meaningfully. Precisely. These are consumer-grade products, the kind jealous spouses or paranoid parents use, not professional surveillance equipment. I thanked Alex, promising to buy him a month of coffee at Rachel's bookstore cafe. After hanging up, I stared at the collection of cameras. It was her, I said, certainty hardening my voice. Eleanor? Stayed here for 5 days while we were gone. She put these here right before we returned. But why? Rachel asked. What could she possibly hope to gain? That was the question that haunted me as I waited for Daniel to come home. What did his mother want to see? What was she looking for? Eleanor had never made it a secret that she thought Daniel had married beneath him. I was just a teacher from a working-class family in rural Oregon. Daniel had an engineering degree from Stanford and came from a family with old banking money. In Eleanor's eyes, I had never been good enough, but installing cameras went beyond disapproval. This was calculated, deliberate invasion. This was someone who wanted to gather information or evidence. The front door opened at 7:15 p.m. I heard Daniel's familiar footsteps in the hallway, the soft thud of his laptop bag hitting the entryway bench, the jingle of keys being placed in the ceramic bowl I'd made in a pottery class last year. Jess? Why are all the lights off? He called, flipping on the living room switch. I sat at the kitchen island, the 6 cameras arranged before me. We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Daniel froze in the doorway, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he took in my tear-stained face and the strange devices on the counter. What's going on? What are those? Cameras, I said simply. Hidden cameras. I found them all over our house today. He approached slowly, as if the devices might leap up and attack him. What? Who would? He stopped abruptly, picking up one of the cameras and examining it. Where did you find these? Bedroom, bathroom, living room, kitchen, guest room. I pointed to each camera in turn. They were installed while we were in Maui. Understanding dawned on his face, followed, immediately by denial. No, no way. My mother wouldn't. Daniel, I interrupted gently. Who else had access to our house? He shook his head vehemently. There has to be another explanation. Maybe we were targeted by thieves casing the place, or they're linked to a phone app, I said. Alex, Rachel's friend in cybersecurity, confirmed they were installed recently and transmit to a device within a quarter-mile radius. Daniel's shoulders slumped as the evidence mounted. He sank onto the bar stool beside me, running his hands through his dark hair. A gesture so reminiscent of his mother, it made my chest tighten. Why? He whispered, the single word laden with hurt and confusion. Why would she do this to us? I reached for his hand, relieved when he didn't pull. Away. I don't know, but we need to confront her. Daniel nodded slowly, his expression hardening into something I rarely saw, resolve tinged with anger. Not just confront her. If these cameras were recording our private moments without consent, that's illegal. We should talk to the police. His willingness to pursue this legally surprised me. Daniel typically avoided conflict with his mother at all costs, preferring to keep the peace even when Eleanor overstepped boundaries. This reaction told me how deeply violated he felt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Before we go to the police, I suggested, maybe we should talk to her first. Find out why she did this? Daniel nodded, already reaching for his phone. I'll tell her to come over tomorrow morning. No, I said quickly, placing my hand over his. Not here. Not in our home. Neutral territory. He understood immediately. The park by the lake. 10 a.m. That night, neither of us slept well. Daniel tossed and turned beside me, occasionally mumbling in his sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what Eleanor had seen through her cameras, what she had been looking for. The violation felt profound, as if she had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart with her manicured hands. Morning came with a gray drizzle that matched our mood. We arrived at Lakeside Park early, claiming a bench under the gazebo that offered shelter from the rain. Daniel had barely spoken during the drive, his jaw set in a way that reminded me of the early days of our marriage when we'd argued about Eleanor's constant interference. She arrived precisely at 10, her silver, Mercedes pulling into the parking lot with military precision. Eleanor Mitchell was not a woman who tolerated tardiness, from herself or others. Even from a distance, I could see she was impeccably dressed in a beige trench coat and matching silk scarf. Her silver bob, never a hair out of place, gleamed even in the dull morning light. Daniel, Jessica. She greeted us with practiced warmth as she approached the gazebo, unfurling a black umbrella even though the roof protected her from the rain. Control. Eleanor's defining characteristic. What's this urgent matter that couldn't wait until Sunday dinner? Daniel reached into the messenger bag at his feet and placed one of the cameras on the bench between us. Care to explain this? Mom? Eleanor's expression didn't change, but I noticed the slight stiffening of her shoulders, the almost imperceptible narrowing of her eyes. I don't understand. What is that? It's a camera, I said. One of 6 we found hidden throughout our home yesterday, in our bedroom, in our bathroom, recording our most private moments. How disturbing, Eleanor replied, her voice perfectly modulated to convey concern. Did you call the police? Daniel leaned forward. Mom, stop. The cameras were installed while Jess and I were in Maui, while you were house-sitting. Are you accusing me of something? Her tone shifted from concern to indignation so smoothly it would have been impressive if it weren't so manipulative. We're not accusing, I said, though of course we were. We're asking for an explanation. I don't need to explain myself to you, Eleanor snapped, mask slipping momentarily. If you found cameras in your home, perhaps you should look to your wife, Daniel. Who knows what she gets up to while you're working those long hours? The attack was so unexpected that I gasped. Daniel's face darkened with anger. That's enough, Mom. We know the cameras transmit to a phone app. If you give us your phone right now and there's no such app, we'll believe you and apologize. It was a clever move on Daniel's part, a direct challenge that would force her hand. Eleanor clutched her designer handbag closer to her body, a defensive gesture that told us everything we needed to know. This is absurd. I'm not giving you my private phone. Then we'll go to the police, Daniel said simply. I'm sure they can get a warrant based on the evidence we have. For the first time, fear flickered across Eleanor's perfectly composed features. You wouldn't do that to your own mother. You installed cameras in our bedroom, Daniel countered, voice rising. You violated our privacy in the most fundamental way possible. What were you looking for? What did you hope to see? Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced around the park as if seeking escape, but there was nowhere to run from this confrontation. I was protecting you, she finally said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. From her. The venom with which she said, her, made my skin crawl. Daniel tensed beside me. What are you talking about? He demanded. She's not who you think she is, Daniel. Eleanor leaned forward, suddenly eager to share her poisonous thoughts. I've suspected for years that she's only with you for financial security. The constant home renovations draining your accounts. The expensive fertility treatments when she probably knows she can't give you children. Stop, Daniel interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. You don't get to speak about Jess that way. But Eleanor was like a dam that had broken, years of carefully restrained disdain pouring out in a toxic flood. I needed evidence, Daniel. Evidence that she's manipulating you. I thought if I could show you. Show me what? Daniel exploded, causing a nearby jogger to startle and change direction. Show me my wife living her life, loving me, working 50 hours a week teaching children while still making time to cook dinner most nights? What exactly did you hope? These cameras would reveal? Eleanor straightened, affronted by his outburst. I was trying to protect your inheritance. My inheritance. The Mitchell family money that she's slowly siphoning away with her working-class taste and public school. Teacher aspirations. The naked contempt in her voice shocked me despite years of subtle slights and backhanded compliments. So this was what she truly thought of me, of my background, of my career teaching third graders to read and write and think critically. Give me your phone, Mom, Daniel said, his hand extended, palm up. The steel in his voice was new, a boundary, finally drawn after years of capitulation. Absolutely not. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own phone. Then I'm calling Detective Patel right now. Daniel already spoke with her this morning. She's expecting our call if this conversation didn't resolve the issue. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. Eleanor's perfectly maintained facade cracked further, panic rising in her eyes. Fine, she snapped, digging into her handbag and thrusting her phone at Daniel. But you won't find anything because I've done nothing wrong. Daniel took the phone, the latest iPhone model in a monogrammed leather case, and began searching through the apps. Eleanor watched with growing discomfort, repeatedly glancing at her watch as if she had somewhere more important to be. There's nothing there, she said after several minutes. Are you satisfied now? But Daniel wasn't listening. His face had gone pale, his finger frozen over the screen. What is this? He asked, his voice barely audible. What did you find? I moved, closer, trying to see the screen. Give that back, Eleanor demanded, reaching for the phone. Those are private. But Daniel held it away from her, turning the screen toward me. What I saw made my blood run cold. Photos, dozens of them. Not from the cameras we'd discovered, but something far worse. They were pictures of me taken over the past 5 years, at the grocery store, walking to school, meeting Rachel for coffee. Photos that could only have been taken by someone following me, documenting my movements. In some, circles had been drawn around people I was talking to, annotations added in red text, mystery man, affair, or meeting secret boyfriend. Daniel scrolled further, revealing a folder labeled evidence. Inside were photographs of financial statements, close-ups of checks I'd written, screenshots of our joint bank account. Eleanor had been building a case against me, a fictitious narrative of infidelity and financial abuse. "You've been stalking." "Me?" I whispered, nausea rising in my throat. "All this time?" Eleanor lifted her chin defiantly. "I was gathering information. Someone needed to open Daniel's eyes to what you really are." "And what am I, Eleanor?" My voice shook with rage and hurt. "What terrible crime have I committed other than not being born into the right family?" "You're an opportunist," she spat. "I watched you set your sights on my son from the moment you met him. The naive schoolteacher act might fool him, but I see right through you." Daniel stood abruptly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Stop talking. Right now." His voice was so unlike him, cold, commanding, that both Eleanor and I stared in shock. "What you've done isn't just wrong, Mom. It's criminal. Invasion of privacy. Harassment. Possibly stalking." Eleanor paled. "Daniel, you can't possibly—" "I want you to listen very carefully," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "You will delete every photo of Jess from your devices. You will remove the app controlling those cameras. You will never, ever do anything like this again." Eleanor's expression hardened into something ugly. "Or what? Or I go to the police with these photos and the cameras as evidence, and I contact Uncle Richard about removing you from the family trust based on mental instability and criminal behavior." The mention of her brother and the family trust struck Eleanor like a physical blow. Richard Mitchell was the executor of the family's considerable assets, a responsibility Eleanor had coveted since her husband's death. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. "Try me." Daniel's voice was ice. "You crossed an unforgivable line. You violated our home, our privacy, our marriage. You've been stalking my wife for years based on nothing but your own prejudice and paranoia." Eleanor turned to me then, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it took my breath away. "This is your doing. You've turned my son against me." "No, Mom," Daniel said quietly. "You did that all on your own." For a moment, I thought Eleanor might collapse under the weight of her son's rejection. But she recovered quickly, drawing herself up with the dignity of someone who had spent a lifetime perfecting her public image. Without another word, she turned and walked back toward her car, her movements stiff but determined. "Do you think she'll stop?" I asked Daniel as we watched her drive away, the Mercedes accelerating perhaps a little too quickly on the wet pavement. He shook his head, looking suddenly exhausted. "I don't know, but we have evidence now if she doesn't." Later that afternoon, as we sat in our living room trying to process the morning's confrontation, Daniel's phone chimed with an email notification. It was from Eleanor, sent to both of us. "I'm leaving for the Phoenix house tonight," she had written, referring to her winter home in Arizona. "I need time to reconsider many things. Daniel, I hope someday you'll understand I acted out of love and concern. Jessica, I maintain my reservations, but I recognize my methods were inappropriate." It wasn't an apology. Eleanor Mitchell didn't do apologies, but it was a retreat. For now. That night, as Daniel and I lay in our bed, both too wired to sleep despite the emotional exhaustion of the day, he turned to me in the darkness. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have seen it. All these years, I should have recognized what she was doing. I found his hand under the covers, interlacing our fingers. "She's your mother. You wanted to believe the best of her." "She'll be back," he said after a long moment. "Maybe not soon, but eventually." Eleanor Mitchell doesn't surrender territory easily. "I know," I replied. "But when she does come back, we'll be ready. Together." As I drifted toward sleep, I realized something important had shifted between us. For years, Eleanor had been a shadow in our marriage, her disapproval and manipulation creating invisible barriers. Today, those barriers had crumbled under the weight of her actions. Daniel had chosen me, clearly, unequivocally. It shouldn't have taken hidden cameras and stalker photos to bring us to this moment of clarity, but perhaps some poisonous things needed to be dragged into the light to be properly excised. Tomorrow, we would begin the process of healing, of reclaiming our home and our privacy. We would change the locks, sweep for any remaining surveillance devices, perhaps even look for a new house untainted by Eleanor's intrusion. But tonight, we would simply hold on to each other, survivors of a storm that had been brewing for far longer than either of us had recognized. In the morning light, we would be stronger. Together. The next morning, I awoke to an empty bed and the smell of coffee wafting from the kitchen. I found Daniel at the dining table, his laptop open, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd been up for hours, or perhaps hadn't slept at all. "Hey," I said softly, pouring myself a cup from the freshly brewed pot. "How long have you been up?" "Since 4. His voice was raspy with exhaustion. I couldn't stop thinking about everything. I settled into the chair beside him, glancing at his screen. He was looking at home security systems, the professional kind with monitoring, services and tamper alerts. "Do you think that's necessary?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The violation we'd experienced had shattered our sense of safety in ways that couldn't be easily repaired. Daniel ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "She had a key made. Did you know that? I called the locksmith this morning, the one who installed our new deadbolts last year. He confirmed someone requested a duplicate of our keys 3 months ago, claimed to be my wife. The revelation sent a chill through me. 3 months? But that means she's been planning this for a while," Daniel finished, his expression grim. The cameras were just the culmination. I tried to process this new information. Eleanor hadn't acted on impulse. She'd been methodically plotting to spy on us for months. The premeditation made her betrayal even more disturbing. "I've been going through our credit card statements," Daniel continued, clicking to a different tab on his browser. "Remember those 3 days last spring when my card was declined, and the bank said it was because of suspicious activity?" I nodded, recalling Daniel's frustration as we'd waited for a replacement card. "I think she was behind that too. The suspicious activity was a charge at a women's clothing store in Portland, a store my mother frequents. I think she somehow got hold of my card details, made a purchase, then reported it as fraud, knowing the bank would issue a new card and freeze the old one. But why would she do that?" Daniel's laugh was hollow. "To cause problems. To make you question my financial stability. To create friction between us. Take your pick." I remembered that week. The tension of unexpected cash flow issues. The embarrassment of having to borrow money from Rachel to cover groceries until the new card arrived. Eleanor's sabotage had worked. We'd snapped at each other more than usual, stress mounting as bills came due. "What else?" I asked, sensing there was more. Daniel hesitated. "I found something on her phone yesterday that I didn't show you." He opened his email and pulled up photos he'd apparently sent to himself from Eleanor's device. These were in a folder labeled Insurance. The images loaded, and I gasped. They were screenshots of emails, my emails, dating back several years. Private correspondence with my doctor about fertility treatments, discussions with Rachel, About marriage struggles during our second year, even emails to my mother venting about Eleanor's controlling behavior. How did she get these? My voice sounded distant to my own ears, shock numbing my emotions. I don't know yet. Maybe she installed spyware on your laptop during one of her visits. Maybe she figured out your password. Daniel closed the laptop as if he couldn't bear to look at the evidence of his mother's betrayal any longer. I'm so sorry, Jess. I had no idea she would go this far. I reached for his hand across the table, anchoring myself to him amid the swirling violation. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? He met my eyes, raw pain evident in his gaze. I'm the one who always made excuses for her behavior. That's just Mom being Mom. She's protective because it was just the two of us for so long. She means well. I enabled this, Jess, for years. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. News about Eleanor. Call me. When you can. I showed Daniel the message, and he nodded. Put her on speaker. Rachel answered on the first ring. Hey. So, I didn't want to bother you guys last night after everything, but I thought you should know. Eleanor came into the bookstore yesterday afternoon, right after your confrontation in the park. My stomach knotted. What did she want? To talk about you, obviously. Rachel's tone was matter-of-fact. She tried to get me to confirm her suspicions, asked if you'd ever mentioned being unhappy with Daniel, if you complained about money issues, if you'd ever hinted at seeing other men. Daniel's jaw tightened visibly. What did you tell her? I told her that Jessica is the most loyal, honest person I know, and that her conspiracy theories were both offensive and potentially defamatory. Rachel replied with characteristic directness. Then I suggested she leave before I called security. I couldn't help but smile despite the circumstances. Rachel had never been intimidated by Eleanor's wealth or status, which was precisely why Eleanor had always disliked her. There's more, Rachel continued. After she left, Veronica Phillips came in about 20 minutes later. My Aunt Veronica? Daniel looked surprised. What was she doing there? She lives in Seattle. Apparently, she's in town visiting your mother. She bought some books and chatted casually, but I got the distinct feeling she was fishing for information too. Asked how long we'd been friends, whether we spent a lot of time together, if we ever took trips without our partners. She's recruiting allies, I realized aloud. Eleanor. She's trying to build support for whatever narrative she's creating about me. That's my guess, Rachel agreed. I kept my answers vague and uninteresting. She left after about 15 minutes, but the whole interaction felt strategic. After thanking Rachel for the warning, we sat in troubled silence. The scope of Eleanor's machinations was expanding before our eyes, not just cameras and stalking photos, but a coordinated campaign to discredit me among family and friends. We need legal advice, Daniel finally said. This is beyond changing locks and installing security systems. We need to know our options if she escalates further. I nodded, relieved he was taking this seriously. Marcus Carter handled our wills last year. He specializes in family law too. Marcus agreed to see us that afternoon, shifting his schedule to accommodate the urgency of our situation. His office downtown exuded calm professionalism, muted colors, comfortable seating, soft lighting designed to soothe anxious clients. Marcus himself, a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, listened intently as we detailed Eleanor's actions, occasionally taking notes or asking clarifying questions. When we finished, he removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture that suggested our situation was even more complex than we'd realized. Let's break this down legally, he said, replacing his glasses. We have several potentially criminal actions: invasion of privacy through hidden cameras, unauthorized access to private communications, possible identity theft regarding the credit card incident, and stalking behaviors evidenced by the photographs. Daniel leaned forward. So we have enough for a restraining order? Probably, Marcus acknowledged, but I'm concerned about potential backlash. Mrs. Mitchell has significant resources and, from what you've described, a vindictive streak. Formal. Legal action might provoke her rather than deter her. What do you suggest? I asked. Document everything. Change all passwords, email accounts, and security questions. Sweep your electronic devices for spyware. Install security cameras openly around your property, the legal kind that you control, and create a clear paper trail of her behavior. He slid a notebook across his desk. Start keeping a detailed log of every interaction, every suspicious incident, dates, times, witnesses. If this continues despite your warnings, we'll have a stronger case. And in the meantime, we just wait for her next move? Daniel sounded frustrated. Marcus's expression softened with sympathy. I understand your desire for immediate action, but strategic patience might serve you better than an aggressive legal approach at this stage. Mrs. Mitchell has temporarily retreated to Arizona, giving you breathing room to secure your home and digital presence. Use this time wisely. As we left the office, I could feel Daniel's tension radiating beside me. He'd been raised to respect authority, to trust systems, to believe that problems could be solved through proper channels. The suggestion that we might need to tolerate further intrusions before the law could adequately protect us clearly grated against his sense of justice. He's right, I said as we walked to the car. Eleanor operates in gray areas, actions that are unethical but difficult to prosecute. We need to be smarter than she is. Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly. I hate this. I hate that we have to strategize against my own mother. I hate that she's made you feel unsafe in your own home. I squeezed his hand, grateful for his unwavering support despite the emotional turmoil he must be experiencing. We'll get through this. Together. The next week passed in a flurry of defensive activities. We changed the locks on every door. Daniel installed a comprehensive security system with cameras covering all entry points. Their presence obvious and intentional, a clear message to anyone considering trespassing. We created new email accounts, changed dozens of passwords, and set up two-factor authentication on everything from our bank accounts to our Netflix subscription. I took my laptop to a computer security expert recommended by Marcus, who confirmed my fears. Spyware had been installed more than 2 years ago, giving someone remote access to my emails, browsing history, and potentially my camera and microphone. The violation stretched back much further than we'd initially suspected. Eleanor remained in Arizona, maintaining radio silence aside from one terse email to Daniel about transferring some family heirlooms to his cousin for safekeeping. The implicit threat wasn't lost on either of us. She was removing his inheritance, piece by piece, punishing him for choosing me over family loyalty. On Friday evening, as Daniel and I were discussing whether to accept an invitation to his cousin's wedding in Seattle, another potential Eleanor encounter, the doorbell rang. Through our new security camera, we saw Detective Sarah Patel standing on our porch, her expression professional but troubled. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, she asked when Daniel opened the door. I'm Detective Patel with Lakeside Police Department. I was hoping to speak with you about some concerns that have been brought to our attention. My stomach dropped as Daniel invited her in. We settled in the living room, Detective Patel declining offers of water or coffee. I'll get straight to the point, she said, opening a small notebook. We received a report yesterday expressing concern about Mrs. Mitchell's mental health and possible harassment behaviors. Normally, we would take such reports at face value, but this one contained some inconsistencies that prompted me to follow up in person. Daniel and I exchanged confused glances. What kind of report? He asked. A wellness check request, ostensibly filed by Jessica's mother, claiming you had been displaying erratic behavior, making paranoid accusations against family members, and potentially posing a danger to yourself. Detective Patel's dark eyes studied my reaction carefully. However, when we contacted Mrs. Anderson in Eugene, she was understandably bewildered, having made no such request. A cold realization washed over me. "Eleanor," I whispered. "She's trying to make me look unstable." Detective Patel nodded slightly. "The report was filed online using an email address similar to your mother's, but not identical. A small discrepancy that fortunately caught our attention. The IP address traces back to Phoenix, Arizona." Daniel's face darkened with anger. "My mother lives in Phoenix part-time. This is clearly her attempt to discredit my wife." "I suspected as much, which is why I wanted to speak with you directly," Detective Patel said. "False police reports are a serious matter. If you have evidence of ongoing harassment, I strongly encourage you to file a formal complaint." I hesitated, remembering Marcus's caution about escalation. "We've been documenting everything, but we were advised to wait until we had a comprehensive record before taking official action." Detective Patel reached into her jacket pocket and removed a business card. "That's prudent, but this false report changes the equation. Someone is attempting to use police resources to intimidate or discredit you. That crosses a line from private harassment to public endangerment." She stood to leave, but paused at the door. "One more thing. The report mentioned hidden cameras found in your home, framing it as a paranoid delusion on your part. If you actually did find surveillance devices, I'd be very interested in examining them." Daniel disappeared into his office and returned with the box containing the 6 cameras we'd collected. These were installed while we were away on vacation. My mother was house-sitting. Detective Patel's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with interest as she examined the devices. "I'll need to take these into evidence. Would you be willing to provide a formal statement about when and where you found them?" We agreed to come to the station the next morning. After Detective Patel left, Daniel paced the living room, unable to contain his agitation. "She's gone too far this time," he said, voice tight with controlled fury. "Using the police to harass you? Making you seem mentally unstable? This isn't just about controlling me anymore. She's actively trying to harm you." I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. What is she hoping to accomplish? Even if she somehow convinced people I was unstable, what would that achieve? Daniel stopped pacing, his expression troubled. "Control? If she can establish that you're unstable, she could potentially influence decisions about our finances, our relationship, even—" He broke off, looking uncomfortable. "Even what, Daniel?" "Even custody if we ever have children," he admitted, quietly. "She's playing a long game, Jess, creating a paper trail she could use against you in the future." The realization struck me like a physical blow. We'd been trying to conceive for nearly 2 years, enduring invasive fertility treatments and the emotional roller coaster of monthly disappointments. Eleanor knew how desperately we wanted children, and she was positioning herself to interfere with that future before it even existed. "No," I said firmly, standing up. "I'm not going to let her poison our future with her manipulations. We're filing that police report first thing tomorrow, and we're requesting a restraining order. Enough strategic patience. It's time to fight back." Daniel nodded, relief evident in his expression. "I'll call Marcus tonight to let him know our decision." The next morning at the police station, we provided detailed statements about the cameras, the stalking photos, the email intrusion, and the false police report. Detective Patel listened attentively, occasionally asking questions but mostly allowing us to tell our story without interruption. When we finished, she closed her notebook with a decisive snap. "I've seen cases like this before," she said. "Family members who can't respect boundaries, who believe their blood connection entitles them to control others' lives. The technology may change, but the psychology remains the same." "Will there be enough for a restraining order?" Daniel asked. Based on the evidence you've provided, yes. The unauthorized surveillance alone would justify it, Detective Patel confirmed. The false police report adds weight to your case. I'll speak with the district attorney about possible charges related to that as well. As we completed the necessary paperwork, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Rachel. I stepped into the hallway to answer. "Jess, are you sitting down?" Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "What's wrong?" "Eleanor's back in town. She came into the bookstore this morning with a woman she introduced as her personal assistant. They browsed for a while. Then Eleanor cornered me by the register and started asking questions about your fertility treatments." My blood ran cold. "What? How would she even know about those?" "That's just it. She shouldn't." "But she knew. Details, Jess. Specific details about procedures and medications that you wouldn't share casually." The spyware on my laptop. It must have given Eleanor access to medical emails, appointment confirmations, maybe even financial statements for treatment costs. The invasion of privacy felt even more violating in this new context. Eleanor hadn't just been spying on our general lives. She'd been monitoring my most intimate health information. "There's more," Rachel continued. She implied that prolonged fertility treatments could affect your mental stability. Said something about how hormonal interventions can cause significant psychological side effects and asked if I'd noticed any changes in your behavior. She was clearly trying to establish a narrative of you being emotionally unstable. I leaned against the wall, feeling suddenly unsteady. "We're at the police station right now filing a report about her harassment." "Good, because she's escalating, Jess. The way she asked those questions, it wasn't just nosy or manipulative, it was calculating, like she was building a case." After promising to call Rachel later, I returned to the interview room where Daniel was finishing his statement. I relayed Rachel's information to both him and Detective Patel, watching their expressions darken with concern. "This adds another dimension to your complaint," Detective Patel noted, making additional notes. "Attempting to use private medical information to create a false impression of mental instability could potentially constitute defamation, especially if she's sharing these insinuations with multiple people." Daniel's phone chimed with a text message. He glanced at it, his face paling slightly. "It's from my cousin Andrew. He says my mother is telling family members that we're having serious marital problems, and that she's concerned about my financial welfare because you've been making irrational decisions with our joint accounts." The coordinated nature of Eleanor's attacks was becoming frighteningly clear. She was systematically undermining my reputation among friends, family, and now potentially law enforcement, creating a consistent narrative of me as unstable, financially irresponsible, and potentially dangerous. "She's trying to isolate us," I realized aloud. "Turn people against me and make Daniel doubt me too." Detective Patel fixed us with a serious look. "This pattern of behavior is concerning. I've seen cases where this type of character assassination precedes more direct forms of harassment or even violence. I strongly advise both of you to maintain detailed records of every interaction, no matter how minor it seems." As we left the police station with temporary protection order paperwork in hand, to be served to Eleanor within 24 hours, Daniel received another text, this time from his office. His face went from concerned to ashen as he read it. "What now?" I asked, dreading the answer. "My boss wants to see me immediately. Says there's an urgent matter regarding my employment that can't wait until Monday." He looked up from his phone, bewilderment clear in his expression. What could Eleanor possibly have done to affect my job? We were about to find out, and the answer would shake the foundations of our lives even further. Daniel insisted I come with him to the meeting at his software company's downtown office. On the 20-minute drive, we speculated about what Eleanor might have done, each possibility more disturbing than the last. Had she contacted his boss with lies about his mental state? Fabricated evidence of wrongdoing? Somehow interfered with his work accounts? The reality, as we discovered, was both simpler and more devastating. "I'm sorry to call you in on a Saturday," said Howard Bergman, the company's CEO, as we settled into chairs in his glass-walled office overlooking the Lakeside Business District. "But this situation requires immediate attention." Daniel leaned forward, his posture tense but professional. "What situation exactly?" Howard slid a folder across his desk. "Yesterday afternoon, our legal department received a formal notice that you are being sued for breach of contract and intellectual property theft by Mitchell Financial Holdings. The plaintiff alleges you misappropriated proprietary trading algorithms, developed during your previous employment, and implemented similar systems here at Lakeside Software." Daniel stared at the document in shock. "Mitchell Financial Holdings. That's my family's company. My mother is the majority shareholder." "Yes, we're aware of that connection, which makes this situation particularly delicate," Howard replied, his expression carefully neutral. "The complaint is quite detailed, citing specific code structures and system architectures allegedly developed under their roof and now appearing in our trading platform modules, the modules you helped design." I watched the color drain from Daniel's face as the magnitude of Eleanor's attack became clear. She wasn't just trying to damage our relationship or my reputation. She was directly targeting Daniel's career, his professional integrity, the work he had poured himself into for the past 4 years. "This is completely fabricated," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the obvious shock. "I never worked on algorithmic trading at Mitchell Financial. I was in their IT security division. Different department, different building, different skill set entirely." Howard nodded thoughtfully. "I suspected as much. Your work here has always been impeccable and your ethics beyond reproach. However, you understand that with litigation pending, we have protocols that must be followed." The implication hung heavily in the air. Daniel would be suspended, possibly terminated, while the company investigated the allegations. His reputation in the industry, built over a decade of dedicated work, could be irreparably damaged, even if he was eventually cleared. "Can I see the specific allegations?" Daniel asked, professional training overtaking emotional reaction. Howard passed over another document, this one thicker than the first. Daniel scanned it quickly, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to dawning comprehension. "These code snippets," he said, pointing to examples in the complaint, "they're not even from Mitchell Financial's systems. They're from open-source projects I contributed to years ago, before I worked for either company. Anyone could access them through GitHub. This is so easily disproven it's almost laughable." "That may be the case," Howard acknowledged, "but the legal process must still be followed." "The company is prepared to support your defense, Daniel. We value your contributions and believe in your integrity. But until this is resolved, we'll need to place you on administrative leave. Paid, of course." As we drove home in stunned silence, the full scope of Eleanor's vendetta became clear. She was attacking every aspect of our lives, our home through surveillance, my reputation through gossip and insinuation, Daniel's career through false legal claims, and our financial stability, through the inevitable costs of fighting these battles. She was willing to weaponize the family company, potentially damaging its reputation as well, just to punish Daniel for choosing me. "She's trying to destroy us," I finally said as we pulled into our driveway. "Completely and systematically." Daniel nodded grimly. "She miscalculated, though. Howard doesn't believe the allegations for a second, and I can disprove them easily. She's exposed herself legally with this lawsuit." "But the damage is already happening," I pointed out. "You're on leave. Our lives are in chaos. The stress alone is harmful." "That's her playbook," Daniel said, shutting off the engine. "She doesn't need to win the legal battle. The process itself is the punishment." As we walked toward our front door, movement in the side yard caught my attention. A man in casual clothing was crouched beside our air conditioning unit, apparently examining something. When he noticed us approaching, He straightened quickly, nodding in awkward acknowledgement. "Can we help you?" Daniel called, his posture instantly alert. "Just checking the meter," the man replied, gesturing vaguely toward the side of the house before walking briskly toward a plain white van parked across the street. Daniel and I exchanged suspicious glances. "The electric meter is on the other side of the house," he said quietly, "and that's not a utility company van." We hurried inside, immediately checking our security camera footage. The system had captured the man arriving 20 minutes earlier, carrying what appeared to be a toolbox. He had spent time near several areas of our property: the air conditioning unit, the cable box, the porch light. "He's installing something," Daniel realized aloud. "More surveillance devices." I felt sick with violation. Even with police reports filed and protective orders in process, Eleanor was escalating her harassment campaign. The temporary refuge of our home was being compromised yet again. "Call Detective Patel," I said, already reaching for my phone. "This has gone far enough." As Daniel made the call, I sat heavily on the couch, the weight of the past 2 weeks crushing down on me. Eleanor's obsession had transformed from annoying interference to targeted destruction. And somewhere in Arizona, or perhaps closer than we thought, she was orchestrating it all, moving pieces on a board where our lives, our relationships, our futures were merely pawns in her twisted game of control. The sanctuary we had built together was under siege, and the enemy wasn't a stranger but family, making the betrayal all the more devastating. What would Eleanor do next? And more importantly, how far would she go to achieve her goal of separating Daniel from the woman she had deemed unworthy of her son? We were about to find out, and the answer would challenge everything we thought we knew about the limits of obsession and the true meaning of family. Detective Patel arrived within 30 minutes, accompanied by a tech specialist from the police department. They circled our property methodically, using handheld detection equipment to locate the devices the mysterious man had planted. By sunset, they had found 3: a listening device attached to our air conditioning unit, a secondary camera disguised as part of our porch light fixture, and a GPS tracker magnetically attached to the underside of my car. "This is beyond harassment," Detective Patel said, carefully bagging each device as evidence. "This is criminal stalking and surveillance. These aren't consumer-grade products either. They're sophisticated equipment typically used by private investigators or security firms." Daniel stood beside me on the porch, his arm around my shoulders. "Is there any way to trace who purchased them?" "Possibly. We'll run serial numbers, check with manufacturers." Detective Patel's expression was grave. But Mrs. Mitchell could have used intermediaries to acquire these. People with resources can usually create distance between themselves and their actions. The tech specialist approached, holding up his tablet. "I've completed the electronic sweep of the house. No additional devices inside, but I found something interesting on your Wi-Fi network." He turned the screen toward us. "Someone created a backdoor access point about 3 days ago. It would allow remote monitoring of any data transmitted over your home network, browsing history, emails, even certain types of local file transfers." 3 days ago? I repeated. "That's after we changed all our passwords and installed the security system." Detective Patel nodded thoughtfully. "Which suggests someone physically accessed your router recently. Have you had any service visits? Deliveries that required entry to your home?" Daniel and I exchanged alarmed glances as the same realization hit us simultaneously. "The security system installer," Daniel said. "He came on Tuesday to set up the cameras and motion sensors." "From Safeguard Security?" I asked, pulling up the company's contact information on my phone. "No," Daniel corrected, looking increasingly troubled. "Central Valley Protection. Remember? Safeguard couldn't schedule us until next week, so I went with the company that could come sooner." Detective Patel took out her notebook. I'll need the company's information and the name of the technician who performed the installation. As Daniel provided the details, a sick feeling settled in my stomach. Eleanor hadn't just found a way around our new security measures. She had weaponized them, turning our protection into another avenue for invasion. I recommend staying elsewhere tonight, Detective Patel advised as her team prepared to leave. At least until we can verify the security company's legitimacy and ensure your home is truly clear of surveillance. We could go to Rachel's, I suggested to Daniel. She has a guest room. Detective Patel shook her head. I'd advise against locations known to Mrs. Mitchell. A hotel would be safer, preferably one with interior corridors and security cameras. Register under a different name. As we hastily packed overnight bags, I marveled at how quickly our lives had descended into something resembling a spy thriller. Burner phones, surveillance sweeps, hiding in hotels under assumed names. Just 3 weeks ago, my biggest concern had been coordinating paint colors for our kitchen renovation. The Cedar Grove Inn on the outskirts of Lakeside was older, but well-maintained, its brick exterior and flowering gardens creating a quaint, peaceful atmosphere that belied our current turmoil. We checked in under Rachel's last name, paid cash, and requested a room away from the parking lot. Once alone in our room, Daniel finally allowed his composure to crack. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped in defeat. I should call my Uncle Richard, he said, staring at his phone. He needs to know what's happening. If Mom is using Mitchell Financial for her vendetta, he has a right to intervene as co-trustee. I sat beside him, taking his hand. Are you sure that's wise? We don't know if he's aligned with your mother. Uncle Richard has always been the reasonable one in the family. He was my dad's younger brother, not my mother's blood relative. She only tolerated him because the company bylaws require multiple trustees. Daniel squeezed my hand. Besides, we're running out of allies. We need someone on the inside of the Mitchell family business. The call was brief, but intense. Daniel outlined Eleanor's escalating behavior, the cameras, the stalking, the false lawsuit, the ongoing surveillance. His uncle's responses were too quiet for me to hear, but Daniel's expression shifted from apprehension to cautious relief as the conversation progressed. He didn't know, Daniel reported after ending the call. Mom presented the lawsuit as a routine intellectual property protection matter, claimed I had accidentally incorporated proprietary code into my current work. She never mentioned it was directly targeting me or that there was any personal motivation. Does he believe you? Yes. He's going to review the filing himself and speak with the company lawyers. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. He also confirmed something I've long suspected. Mom has been consolidating power at Mitchell Financial for years, placing loyal employees in key positions, sidelining anyone who questions her decisions. Uncle Richard has been effectively marginalized, despite his trustee status. So even your uncle can't fully rein her in? Not immediately, but he has connections with the board of directors. If he can persuade them that Eleanor is using company resources for a personal vendetta, they might intervene. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text. It's from Howard. The Mitchell Financial legal team has already contacted Lakeside Software to schedule depositions for next week. They're moving aggressively on this lawsuit. I stood and began pacing the small hotel room, frustration building with each step. This feels like death by 1,000 cuts. Each individual action, the cameras, the false police report, the lawsuit, we could handle. But all together? She's overwhelming us with attacks from every direction. Daniel nodded grimly. Classic Eleanor strategy. She never confronts problems directly. She surrounds them, cuts off support, isolates weaknesses, then moves in for the kill. So how do we fight someone who won't stand still for a direct confrontation? I stopped pacing, a new thought forming. What if we change the battlefield? Eleanor is accustomed to operating from the shadows, using proxies and manipulations. What if we drag everything into the light? Daniel looked skeptical. What do you mean? I mean public exposure. Right now, she's controlling the narrative. With everyone. Your family, your colleagues, even the authorities to some extent. What if we take that control away? How? I sat beside him again, energized by the first glimmer of a proactive strategy. We document everything. The cameras, the photos from her phone, the false police report, the lawsuit, and we make it public. Not just to the police or your family, but more broadly. Daniel's expression darkened. You want to publicly humiliate my mother? Expose family secrets for anyone to see? His resistance wasn't surprising. Despite everything, Eleanor was still his mother, and Mitchell family values included presenting a united front to the outside world, no matter what turmoil existed behind closed doors. Not to humiliate her, I clarified. To protect ourselves. Eleanor's power comes partly from secrecy, from controlling what people know and when they know it. If everyone is aware of what's happening, she loses that advantage. Daniel stood and walked to the window, staring out at the hotel's garden, illuminated by subtle landscape lighting. For a long moment, he said nothing, wrestling with the competing loyalties that had been Eleanor's most effective weapon against us. You're right, he finally said, turning back to me. My mother counts on privacy to mask her manipulations. It's always been her method, divide people by controlling the flow of information between them. His phone buzzed again. Another text. It's Detective Patel, he reported. Central Valley Protection is a legitimate security company, but they never sent anyone to our house. The technician who installed our system wasn't their employee. The implications were chilling. Eleanor hadn't just hired someone to place surveillance devices. She had orchestrated an elaborate deception, creating a scenario where we would willingly allow a stranger to access every corner of our home. We need to go nuclear on this, I said firmly. No more playing defense. Daniel nodded. Decision made. Let's make a list of everyone who needs to know the full story. Family members, my colleagues, our friends, anyone Eleanor might try to manipulate. We spent the next hour crafting a detailed account of Eleanor's escalating behavior, from the initial camera discovery to the latest surveillance devices. We included photos, dates, police report numbers, and Detective Patel's contact information for verification. The document was factual and restrained, not accusatory or emotional, but meticulously documented. Should we send this tonight? Daniel asked, hovering over the email program on his laptop. I checked the time, nearly midnight. Let's wait until morning. We want people to actually read it, not dismiss it as a late-night rant. We fell into an exhausted sleep, both physically and emotionally drained by the day's revelations. The hotel bed was comfortable enough, but unfamiliar sounds kept startling me awake. Ice machines humming, other guests walking down the corridor, the distant rumble of trucks on the highway. Each noise triggered a momentary panic, my body now conditioned to perceive ordinary sounds as potential threats. Morning arrived with gray skies and steady rain, matching our somber mood as we reviewed our documentation one final time. Just as Daniel was about to hit send on the first batch of emails, his phone rang. The screen displayed, Uncle Richard. Daniel, are you somewhere private? His uncle asked without preamble. There's been a development you need to know about immediately. Daniel put the call on speaker. I'm with Jessica. What's happened? Eleanor called an emergency board meeting at Mitchell Financial this morning, 7 a.m., so I nearly missed it. I'm sure that was intentional. Richard's voice was tight with controlled anger. She's making a move to have you declared mentally incompetent. What? Daniel and I exclaimed simultaneously. She presented documentation suggesting you've been experiencing paranoid delusions, making irrational financial decisions, and becoming increasingly estranged from family members. She's petitioning for temporary conservatorship over your affairs for your own protection. My hand flew to my mouth in horror. A conservatorship would give Eleanor legal control over Daniel's finances, his medical decisions, potentially even his personal freedom. "That's absurd," Daniel sputtered. "I'm a fully functioning adult with no history of mental illness or financial irresponsibility. No court would grant such a petition." "Don't be so sure," Richard cautioned. "She's been building this case methodically. The documentation she presented was extensive. Statements from family friends expressing concern about your behavior. Reports from a private investigator claiming to have observed erratic conduct. Even a psychological evaluation." "I never underwent any psychological evaluation," Daniel protested. "Nevertheless, there's a report with a licensed psychiatrist's signature suggesting you exhibit symptoms consistent with early-onset paranoid personality disorder, allegedly exacerbated by Jessica's codependent enabling." I felt physically ill. Eleanor wasn't just trying to separate us or damage my reputation. She was attempting to strip Daniel of his legal autonomy, to declare him incompetent so she could reassert complete control over his life. "This can't be legal," I said. "Fabricating medical reports, manipulating the legal system. There must be consequences for such actions." "If we can prove fabrication, absolutely," Richard agreed. "But Eleanor is too smart for obvious forgeries. The psychiatrist who signed the evaluation is Dr. Thomas Blackwell, a longtime Mitchell family associate. He treats many of Boston's elite families and has an impeccable reputation." "But I've never met him," Daniel insisted. "I've never even been to his office." "The report states the evaluation was conducted during your visit to Boston last Christmas. It characterizes it as an informal consultation requested by concerned family members and notes that you were cooperative but displayed clear signs of delusional thinking, particularly regarding your wife's influence on your decision-making." I remembered that Christmas visit, 3 tense days at the Mitchell family's historic Beacon Hill home. Daniel had spent several hours at his grandfather's attorney's office reviewing trust documents, while I had endured a painfully uncomfortable lunch with Eleanor and her society friends. Could they have had someone pose as an attorney's assistant? I wondered aloud. Someone with psychological training who could interact with Daniel while appearing to be discussing legal matters? "Entirely possible," Richard confirmed. "The Mitchell network of influence runs deep in certain Boston circles." Daniel's expression had transformed from shock to cold fury. "What's the next step in her plan? When does this conservatorship petition go before a judge?" "Preliminary hearing is scheduled for next Wednesday in Boston Probate Court. Eleanor is maneuvering to have the case heard by Judge Hamilton, who has connections to your grandfather's former law partners." "I need to be there to contest this," Daniel said firmly. "Absolutely not," Richard countered. "If you appear, Eleanor will use it as an opportunity to provoke behavior she can characterize as unstable. Your presence plays into her strategy." "So I'm supposed to sit back while my mother attempts to legally declare me incompetent?" Daniel's voice rose with indignation. "No, you're supposed to secure proper legal representation and documentation of your mental competency," Richard replied calmly. "I can recommend several excellent attorneys who specialize in contested conservatorships. Meanwhile, you should undergo a comprehensive psychological evaluation with an independent psychiatrist. Establish a clear record of your mental stability." The call ended with promises of continued updates and contact information for recommended lawyers. Daniel and I sat in stunned silence, the rain pattering against the hotel window the only sound in the room. "A conservatorship," I finally whispered. "I never imagined she'd go this far." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "I should have. This is the ultimate control mechanism, legal authority over my life, my decisions, my future. If she succeeds, she could force me to return to Boston, separate me from you, manage my finances, even make medical decisions on my behalf." I reached for his hand. "We won't let that happen." We have truth on our side. Truth requires a fair hearing, Daniel replied, grimly. If she's manipulating the legal system, stacking the deck with friendly judges and fabricated evidence, truth may not be enough. His phone chimed with an incoming email. Daniel glanced at it, then sat up straighter, expression shifting from despair to confusion. "It's from my mother," he said, opening the message. Subject line, "One last opportunity." I moved closer to read over his shoulder. The email was brief but chilling. "Daniel, recent events have spiraled beyond what either of us would have wished. While I maintain my concerns about Jessica's influence over your decision-making, I am willing to seek a peaceful resolution that preserves family harmony and your long-term interests. I propose the following arrangement. 1. Jessica agrees to a divorce settlement relinquishing all claims to Mitchell family assets or future inheritances. 2. You return to Boston to assume your proper role in the family business. 3. I withdraw the UI conservatorship petition and intellectual property lawsuit. This offer expires at 5 p.m. today. After that, legal proceedings will continue as scheduled, and certain additional documentation regarding Jessica's past will become part of the public record. I act only out of love and concern for your welfare. Mother. Additional documentation? I repeated, a new anxiety blooming. What does that mean? Daniel shook his head. Another threat. Another manipulation. She's implying she has damaging information about you. But I don't have any skeletons in my closet, I protested. I've never been arrested, never had addiction issues, never even had a disciplinary action at work. The truth is irrelevant to Eleanor, Daniel said bitterly. If damaging information doesn't exist, she'll create it, just like the psychological evaluation she fabricated for me. I stood and resumed pacing, mind racing through possibilities. Maybe we should call her bluff. Let her release whatever documentation she claims to have. If it's fabricated, we can prove that and further discredit her efforts. Daniel's expression was troubled. Disproven accusations still leave residue, Jess. People remember the sensational claim, not the subsequent retraction. So what do we do? Capitulate to blackmail? Let her separate us? My voice cracked with emotion. Because that's what this is really about. She's never accepted me, never believed I was good enough for you or the Mitchell name. Daniel stood and pulled me into his arms. Never. I won't let her dictate our future or separate us. We fight. This, together, with every resource available. His phone rang again. Rachel's name appeared on the screen. Jess? Daniel? Where are you guys? Her voice was tense, worried. There are 2 men at your house claiming to be from Adult Protective Services. They're saying they're conducting a welfare check based on reports of coercive control in your relationship. My heart sank. Another front in Eleanor's war against us. Now she was attempting to paint me as an abuser, someone controlling Daniel and isolating him from his family. We're not at the house, Daniel explained quickly. We stayed at a hotel last night on Detective Patel's recommendation. Are these men still there? Yes, and they seem pretty insistent about needing to evaluate your living situation. They have some kind of official-looking documentation. Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. I only stopped by to water your plants, but they've been questioning me about your relationship dynamics, whether I've noticed Daniel becoming more isolated or changing his behavior since being with Jessica. They have no legal right to enter without our permission, Daniel said firmly. Please don't let them in, and don't answer any more questions. Tell them to contact our attorney, Marcus Carter. Already done, Rachel assured us. They didn't like that answer, but they can't force their way in without a warrant. After arranging for Rachel to text us when the men left, we returned to our documentation project with renewed urgency. Eleanor was escalating on multiple fronts simultaneously. The conservatorship petition, the lawsuit, now Child Protective Services. Each action seemed designed to overwhelm us, to create so many crises that we couldn't effectively counter any single attack. We need to accelerate our timeline, I said, adding details about the latest development to our document. Send these emails now, then contact Marcus about the APS visit. We should also call Detective Patel to update her on the conservatorship issue. Daniel nodded grimly, hitting send on the first batch of emails to family members and close friends. We were about to begin the second batch when my phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a Boston area code. Jessica Mitchell? A smooth male voice inquired when I answered. Yes, who's calling? This is Dr. Thomas Blackwell. I believe you. And your husband have recently become aware of my involvement in Eleanor Mitchell's petition for conservatorship. I nearly dropped the phone in shock. How did you get this number? That's not important, Blackwell replied dismissively. What matters is that you understand your position. Eleanor Mitchell is one of Boston's most influential citizens. Her family connections extend to every significant institution in this city: financial, legal, medical, educational. The outcome of this situation is predetermined. Are you actually threatening us? I asked, putting the call on speaker so Daniel could hear. I'm offering perspective, Blackwell corrected. Eleanor is being generous with her current offer. A clean divorce, a fresh start for both of you. The alternative will be messy, public, and ultimately devastating, particularly for you, Jessica. Why are you doing this? Daniel interjected. You're a doctor. You took an oath to do no harm. Yet you've falsified a psychological evaluation to help my mother gain control over my life. There was a pause before Blackwell responded. The Mitchell family has supported my practice and research for 3 generations. Sometimes loyalty requires difficult decisions. I suggest you consider where your own loyalties should properly reside, Daniel. The call ended abruptly, leaving us staring at each other in disbelief. He just openly admitted to fabricating your evaluation, I said, still processing the brazen nature of the threat. That's multiple ethical violations, possibly criminal fraud. And he doesn't care, Daniel replied softly, because he believes Eleanor's influence will protect him from any consequences. The realization settled heavily between us. We weren't just fighting Eleanor. We were fighting an entire system of wealth and privilege that she could manipulate. To her advantage, judges, doctors, law enforcement, family connections, all potential weapons in her arsenal. My phone chimed with a text from Rachel. They finally left after I threatened to call the police, but they said they'd be back with proper authorization to conduct a home inspection. Another piece of Eleanor's strategy revealed: create enough concerns about our living situation that authorities would eventually be compelled to investigate more thoroughly. Each official inquiry, even those that uncovered no wrongdoing, would create a paper trail she could later present as evidence of ongoing issues. We need to get ahead of this, I said, a new determination straightening my spine. These emails are a good start, but they're reactive. We need to be proactive, establish our narrative before Eleanor can further poison the well. Daniel looked up from his laptop. What did you have in mind? Everything we've learned suggests Eleanor believes her power lies in her connections and her ability to control information. So we target both simultaneously. I grabbed a hotel notepad and began outlining a counteroffensive. First, we file formal complaints against Dr. Blackwell with the Medical Licensing Board, the American Psychiatric Association, and the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. His admission on that phone call, which we should have recorded, damn it, gives us grounds to challenge his credibility. Daniel nodded, catching my momentum. We should also file a harassment complaint against the men claiming to be from Adult Protective Services. If they were legitimate, fine. But if they were imposters sent by my mother, that's another criminal act we can document. Exactly, I agreed. And we need to secure our own expert evaluations: financial, psychological, and legal. Create a robust record of our stability and competence that directly contradicts Eleanor's narrative. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were shifting from defense to offense, from reacting to Eleanor's attacks to actively challenging her methods. Daniel's expression reflected a similar resolve. "There's one more thing we need to do," he said quietly. "Something I've been avoiding because of family loyalty, but it's necessary now." "What's that?" "Contact the Mitchell Financial Board of Directors directly." He took a deep breath, as if preparing to cross a threshold. "Eleanor has been using company resources to pursue a personal vendetta. That's a breach of fiduciary duty. The board has a legal obligation to investigate such misuse, regardless of family connections." I reached across the table to squeeze his hand, understanding the significance of this decision. The Mitchell family had always handled internal conflicts privately, resolving disagreements behind closed doors rather than involving outsiders. By bringing the board into this dispute, Daniel was breaking with generations of family tradition. "Are you sure?" I asked gently. He nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Eleanor shattered the rules of family loyalty when she began this campaign against you. Against us. She doesn't get to hide behind those same rules now." As Daniel began drafting an email to the board members, I called Marcus to update him on the latest developments. Our attorney listened gravely, taking detailed notes about Dr. Blackwell's call and the APS visit. "This is escalating beyond simple harassment," Marcus said when I finished. "Eleanor is attempting to use multiple systems, legal, medical, social services, to achieve her goal. The good news is that such a broad attack creates multiple points of vulnerability for her." "How so?" I asked. "Each system has different standards of evidence and different oversight mechanisms. She might be able to influence a probate judge in Boston for the conservatorship hearing, but that doesn't give her control over Oregon's Adult Protective Services or the medical licensing boards. The more fronts she opens, the harder it becomes to maintain coordinated manipulation." His assessment aligned with our emerging strategy: challenge Eleanor on multiple fronts simultaneously, force her to defend her actions across different systems rather than allowing her to focus her considerable resources on a single decisive victory. By early afternoon, we had sent our documentation to key family members, friends, and colleagues, filed complaints against Dr. Blackwell, contacted the Mitchell Financial Board with evidence of Eleanor's misuse of company resources, and arranged for independent psychological evaluations to counter the fabricated assessment. We were preparing to check out of the hotel when Detective Patel called with an unexpected update. "We've identified the man who was installing surveillance devices at your property," she reported. "James Mercer, former military intelligence." If the work was satisfactory. He claims he didn't know the devices were being installed without the homeowner's knowledge or consent, believed he was upgrading existing security for clients who were concerned about recent break-ins in the neighborhood. "Do you believe him?" I asked skeptically. "Not entirely," Detective Patel admitted, "but he's provided useful information about who hired him, which gives us a trail to follow." He also confirmed there were additional devices installed that we didn't locate during our initial sweep. Daniel and I exchanged alarmed glances. "What kind of devices?" he asked. "Nothing in the house itself. Your interior was clean. But he placed GPS trackers on both your vehicles and set up remote surveillance cameras on utility poles with sightlines to your property entrance. These would be invisible to standard detection equipment since they're not on your property." The scope of Eleanor's surveillance operation was staggering. Professional-grade equipment, former military personnel, multiple layers of monitoring. The invasion felt both more intimate and more clinical than I had imagined. "One more thing," Detective Patel added. "Mercer mentioned that another operative was assigned to monitor your workplace, Jessica. Someone posing as a substitute teacher or administrator to gather information about your professional conduct and relationships with colleagues." Ice formed in my veins at this revelation. Eleanor hadn't just been watching our home, she had infiltrated my workplace, potentially manipulating my professional relationships and reputation among colleagues I had known for years. "I need to call my principal," I said urgently. "Warn her about this." Detective Patel promised to continue the investigation and update us as new information emerged. After ending the call, Daniel and I sat in stunned silence, processing the expanding dimensions of Eleanor's campaign against us. "She's created an entire operation," I finally said. "This isn't just a mother being overprotective or disapproving. This is calculated, coordinated psychological warfare." Daniel nodded grimly. "And we've been playing by rules she abandoned long ago." As we checked out of the hotel, uncertainty clouding our next steps, one thing became increasingly clear. This conflict had moved beyond family disagreement or even personal vendetta. Eleanor Mitchell had declared total war on our marriage, our reputations, our very autonomy, and she was prepared to use every resource at her disposal to emerge victorious. The real question was no longer how to reconcile with her or manage her interference, but how to survive her systematic attempt to destroy everything we had built together. And as we loaded our overnight bags into the car, heading toward an undisclosed location recommended by Detective Patel, I wondered just how far Eleanor would go when she discovered her current tactics weren't achieving her desired outcome. The answer, we would soon learn, was far beyond anything we could have imagined. The safe house Detective Patel arranged was a modest cabin owned by the Lakeside Police Department, typically used for witnesses in high-profile cases. Nestled among towering pines at the edge of a small lake 20 miles outside town, its isolation offered both protection and a strange sort of peace. No neighbors meant no curious eyes, no surveillance opportunities, no need to maintain appearances. "You can stay here until we've made more progress on the investigation," Detective Patel explained as she showed us around the rustic two-bedroom structure. "Only 3 people know this location: myself, my captain, and the department property manager. Not even other officers have this address." I ran my hand along the simple pine dining table, worn smooth by years of use. "How long do you think we'll need to be here?" Detective Patel's expression was sympathetic, but frank. "That depends on how quickly we can gather sufficient evidence for arrest warrants. Mrs. Mitchell has created multiple layers of deniability between herself and the illegal actions being carried out. Proving her direct involvement will take time." Daniel stood by the large picture window overlooking the lake, his posture rigid with tension. "And in the meantime, the conservatorship hearing is scheduled for next Wednesday in Boston. If I don't appear, the judge might grant my mother's petition by default." "Your attorney can appear on your behalf," Detective Patel reminded him. "And we're coordinating with Massachusetts authorities regarding Dr. Blackwell's admission of filing a fraudulent medical evaluation. That alone might be grounds to postpone the hearing." After Detective Patel left, promising to return the following day with supplies and updates, Daniel and I explored our temporary refuge. The cabin was basic but comfortable. 2 small bedrooms, an open kitchen and living area, a screened porch facing the water. No television, no internet, just a satellite phone for emergency communications. "It feels like we're in witness protection," I said, testing the firmness of the mattress in what would be our bedroom. Hiding from a threat, cut off from our normal lives, waiting for the legal system to catch up with reality. Daniel sat beside me, the bed creaking under our combined weight. "I'm sorry, Jess. I never imagined my mother would go this far. That she'd be willing to destroy both our lives just to separate us." I leaned against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his warmth. "This isn't your fault. You've stood by me from the moment we discovered those cameras. Many men would have made excuses, tried to rationalize their mother's behavior, chosen family loyalty over marital bonds. She stopped being family the moment she violated our home, Daniel said firmly. Family doesn't spy on you, doesn't fabricate evidence against you, doesn't try to have you declared incompetent because they disapprove of your choices. The satellite phone rang just after sunset, startling us both. Daniel answered cautiously, then relaxed as he recognized Marcus Carter's voice. He put the call on speaker so I could participate. "I've been coordinating with Detective Patel and your Uncle Richard," Marcus reported. "We've developed a multi-pronged strategy to address Eleanor's attacks, but there's been a significant new development you need to know about immediately." Daniel and I exchanged concerned glances. "What's happened?" "The Boston Globe is preparing to run a story about your situation, specifically about Eleanor's conservatorship petition. The angle appears to be prominent business leader takes extraordinary measures to protect son from manipulative relationship." My stomach dropped. Eleanor's feeding them her narrative. "Precisely," Marcus confirmed. "I've been contacted by a reporter seeking comment from your side, which suggests they're at least attempting journalistic balance, but the framing is concerning. They're presenting it as a wealthy family's private struggle rather than a case of harassment and stalking." Daniel's expression hardened. "So she's taking this public now? After generations of Mitchell family emphasis on handling private matters privately?" "It's a calculated move," Marcus analyzed. "By controlling the initial public narrative, she establishes her version as the baseline that your response must overcome. It's also protective. If she portrays her actions as maternal concern rather than criminal harassment, it creates sympathy and makes prosecution more difficult." "What do you recommend?" I asked, dreading the answer. "We have limited options," Marcus admitted. "We can provide a statement to the Globe, hoping they give it equal weight to Eleanor's claims. We can decline comment, which might seem like an admission of guilt to some readers. Or we can attempt to get ahead of the story by giving an exclusive interview to another publication, establish our narrative before Eleanor's version takes hold." Daniel stood and began pacing the small bedroom. "If we go public with everything, the surveillance, the stalking, the false medical reports, we expose not just my mother, but potentially the Mitchell family business. The reputational damage could be severe." "That may be unavoidable at this point," Marcus cautioned. "Eleanor has escalated to using public channels. The question is whether you want your side represented in that public discussion." After ending the call with promises to consider the options and respond by morning, Daniel and I retreated to the screened porch. The evening air was cool against my skin, the gentle lapping of lake water against the shore a rhythmic counterpoint to my racing thoughts. "What do you think we should do?" I finally asked, breaking the contemplative silence. Daniel exhaled slowly. "I don't know. The private approach isn't working. Eleanor's too well connected, too willing to use those connections unethically. But going public feels like mutually assured destruction. The Mitchell name would be tarnished, possibly irreparably. Is protecting the family name worth sacrificing our freedom, our marriage, our future?" I didn't mean for the questions to sound accusatory, but Daniel flinched slightly nonetheless. "No," he said firmly after a moment. "No family legacy is worth what she's putting us through. I'm just trying to think 3 steps ahead, anticipate her countermoves." "If we do give an interview," I mused, "we'd need to be strategic about what we reveal. Focus on the surveillance and harassment without necessarily detailing every aspect of Eleanor's psychological warfare. Lead with the illegal actions rather than the family drama." Daniel nodded slowly, considering. "The Boston Globe already has Eleanor's version. Maybe we approach someone at the Washington Post or New York Times. National coverage would make it harder for her to contain the story within her sphere of influence." By midnight, we had drafted an outline of what we would and wouldn't discuss. In a potential interview, identifying key evidence we could provide while protecting certain personal details. The decision wasn't final. We would consult with Marcus in the morning, but having a plan provided some sense of control in a situation that had spiraled far beyond our grasp. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by unfamiliar cabin, noises and anxiety dreams where I was constantly being watched by unseen observers. I awoke shortly after dawn to find Daniel already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad covered in his precise handwriting. "I've been thinking about Boston," he said without preamble, pushing a cup of freshly brewed coffee toward me. "About the conservatorship hearing." I settled across from him, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "What about it?" "What if I go? What if I appear in person to contest the petition?" His eyes met mine, determination evident in their depths. Not hiding, not sending representatives, but standing there myself to challenge my mother's narrative directly. "Detective Patel advised against it," I reminded him. "She said Eleanor would try to provoke behavior she could characterize as unstable." "Exactly," Daniel nodded. "She expects me to either hide or react emotionally. What if I do neither? What if I appear completely composed, professionally represented, with documentation of her harassment campaign and independent medical evaluations confirming my competence?" I considered the strategy. It would undermine her portrayal of you as unstable or being manipulated. "And it would force her to face me directly," Daniel added. "Everything she's done so far has been through proxies, lawyers, fabricated documents. She hasn't had to look me in the eye and defend her actions." Before I could respond, the satellite phone rang. Detective Patel calling with her morning update. "We've made progress," she reported, her voice energized despite the early hour. "James Mercer provided additional information during his second interview yesterday evening. He confirmed that all surveillance operations were coordinated through a private security firm called Aegis Strategic in Portland." "Never heard of them," Daniel commented. "They maintain a deliberately low profile," Detective Patel explained. "Primarily serve wealthy clients with discreet security needs. We obtained a warrant to search their offices early this morning based on Mercer's testimony." Hope flickered in my chest. "Did you find evidence connecting them to Eleanor?" "Better," Detective Patel said, satisfaction evident in her tone. "We found Eleanor herself." Daniel nearly dropped the phone. "What? My mother is in Portland?" "Arrived 3 days ago, according to hotel records. She's been operating from a suite at the Riverside Grand, making daily visits to Aegis Strategic's offices. The security firm's owner, Michael Donovan, is apparently an old family connection. He worked for Mitchell Financial's corporate security division before starting his own company 15 years ago. The revelation that Eleanor was so physically close, just 90 minutes away in Portland rather than across the country in Boston or Arizona, sent a shiver down my spine. Her proximity made the threat feel more immediate, more personal. It sounded like Uncle Richard, but something was off. The phrasing, the cadence. It wasn't quite right. I replayed the conversation in my mind. "You think it wasn't really him?" "I'm not sure," Daniel admitted. "It could have been, but the connection was poor, and he seemed different, more dramatic than usual. Uncle Richard is typically measured, analytical." "Voice imitation technology exists," I said slowly, the possibility unfurling like a nightmare. "We've already seen Eleanor use technological deception with the fake security system installer." Daniel's expression darkened further. "And the call achieved something very specific. It made us question our safety here, suggested we might be in physical danger, and attempted to extract information about our location." A chill ran down my spine as the implication became clear. It was a phishing attempt. Someone, Eleanor or her operatives, trying to make us reveal where we're staying. Or trying to frighten us into leaving this secure location, Daniel added, grimly. Either way, we need to verify with Detective Patel before taking any action. When Detective Patel arrived that afternoon, she confirmed our suspicions. Richard Mitchell hasn't made any calls to the satellite phone. In fact, when I spoke with him an hour ago, he mentioned that Eleanor has been unreachable since the Aegis strategic raid. Her phone goes straight to voicemail, and she checked out of the Riverside Grand this morning. So, she's in the wind? Daniel concluded. And apparently sophisticated enough to attempt voice impersonation to locate us. Detective Patel nodded soberly. We've increased patrols around your home and workplaces, but I'm glad you're here instead. This location remains secure. She hesitated, then added, There's something else you should know. The search of Aegis Strategic's offices yielded a concerning discovery. Detailed dossiers on both of you, including psychological profiles, personal habits, relationship dynamics, and potential pressure points that could be exploited. Pressure points? I echoed, the clinical term sending a wave of revulsion through me. Vulnerabilities, Detective Patel clarified. Information that could be used to manipulate you emotionally. For Daniel, these included his relationship with his late father, his sense of responsibility toward the family business, and his professional reputation. For you, Jessica, they identified your career dedication, fertility struggles, and clothes, friendship with Rachel as potential leverage points. The systematic analysis of our emotional vulnerabilities felt even more violating than the physical surveillance. Eleanor hadn't just been watching our movements, she had been studying us like specimens, identifying weak spots to exploit with surgical precision. There's more, Detective Patel continued. The files contain detailed intervention scenarios, essentially, scripted confrontations designed to achieve specific outcomes. One scenario, labeled Emergency Extraction, outlined a plan to create a crisis that would separate you from Daniel, Jessica, allowing Eleanor's team to secure Daniel while he was disoriented by your apparent danger. Daniel's face drained of color. They were planning to abduct me? The language is deliberately ambiguous, Detective Patel acknowledged. But yes, that appears to be the intent, to create circumstances where you could be transported to a secure location for evaluation and treatment, potentially to support the conservatorship narrative. I felt physically ill at the revelation. What had started as hidden cameras had evolved into an elaborate conspiracy to essentially kidnap Daniel under the guise of medical intervention. This is enough for arrest warrants, isn't it? I asked, desperate for some indication that the legal system would finally protect us. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping goes beyond harassment or invasion of privacy. The district attorney is preparing warrants now, Detective Patel confirmed, for Eleanor Mitchell and several Aegis strategic employees. The challenge is locating them. As I mentioned, Eleanor has disappeared, and several key Aegis personnel seem to have gone underground as well. That night, after Detective Patel departed with promises to return in the morning, Daniel and I sat on the cabin's screened porch, watching darkness settle over the lake. The knowledge that Eleanor had planned to physically separate us added a new dimension of fear to our already strained emotional state. I keep thinking about what would have happened if we hadn't discovered those first cameras, I said softly. How her plan might have unfolded without our awareness. Daniel's hand found mine in the gathering darkness. But we did discover them, and each step since then, we've managed to stay one move ahead. Not by much, but enough to prevent her worst scenarios from playing out. I feel like we're characters. In some twisted chess game, I confessed. Pieces being moved around a board according to Eleanor's strategy, only occasionally managing to disrupt her plan. Then maybe it's time we flipped the board entirely, Daniel suggested, a new determination in his voice. Stop playing by any rules at all. What do you mean? He turned to face me, features barely visible in the dim light. I've been trying to respond to my mother's attacks without completely severing family ties, without publicly exposing her behavior, without burning every bridge to my past. But that restraint has given her room to maneuver, to escalate each time we counter a move. So what are you suggesting? Nuclear option, Daniel said simply. We give that interview, not just about the surveillance and legal manipulations, but everything. The psychological warfare, the family dynamics, the planned abduction. We expose it all, consequences be damned. The decisiveness in his tone was new, a hardening of resolve that reflected the severity of Eleanor's escalation. Gone was any hesitation about damaging the Mitchell family name or business. His priority now was our safety and freedom, whatever the cost. Are you sure? I asked, knowing how significant this shift in strategy represented for him. Once we go public with everything, there's no going back. Your relationship with your family, your standing in Boston society, your connection to the family business, it all changes permanently. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, the weight of the decision evident in his silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady with certainty. Those things changed the moment my mother decided her control over my life was more important than my happiness or autonomy. I've just been reluctant to acknowledge the full extent of the rupture. He squeezed my hand. My future is with you, Jess. Not with a family that would resort to surveillance, manipulation, and now, apparently, planned abduction to separate me from the woman I love. The next morning, we called Marcus to discuss the interview strategy. He had already heard from Detective Patel about the discovery of the intervention scenarios and agreed that going public might provide an additional layer of protection. Public scrutiny makes it harder for Eleanor to operate in the shadows, he noted. If your story is widely known, any further actions against you will be viewed in the context of her established pattern of behavior, rather than as isolated incidents that could be explained away. Who do we approach? Daniel asked. Which publication would give us the fairest hearing? I have a contact at The Atlantic, Marcus suggested. Catherine Walsh, investigative reporter, specializes in stories about power dynamics and abuse in elite circles. She's thorough, ethical, and not easily intimidated by wealthy interests. By noon, arrangements had been made for a phone interview with Catherine the following day. Marcus would be present as our attorney, and we would provide supporting documentation, police, reports, photographs of the surveillance devices, screenshots of Eleanor's threatening email, and Detective Patel's summary of findings from the Aegis strategic raid. That evening, as Daniel and I prepared dinner in the cabin's small kitchen, the satellite phone rang again. This time, the caller ID displayed Dayat Patel Mobile. I wanted you to hear this directly from me, Detective Patel said when Daniel answered. We've located Eleanor Mitchell. Where is she? Daniel asked, putting the call on speaker. Portland International Airport. She was attempting to board a private charter flight to Vancouver when airport police detained her based on our alert. We're transporting her to Lakeside now for formal arrest and charging. Relief flooded through me. Finally, concrete action from law enforcement after weeks of gathering evidence while our lives remained in limbo. What charges? Daniel inquired, his voice carefully neutral despite the momentous news. Multiple counts, Detective Patel detailed. Criminal harassment, invasion of privacy, conspiracy to commit unlawful surveillance, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. The district attorney is also considering wire fraud charges related to the falsified medical evaluation. Will she be held in custody? I asked, remembering Eleanor's considerable resources and influence. That will be determined at her arraignment tomorrow morning. Given the flight risk she demonstrated today and the serious nature of the charges, we'll be requesting remand. Without bail, but ultimately that's the judge's decision. After ending the call, Daniel and I embraced in the middle of the kitchen, the reality of Eleanor's arrest gradually sinking in. After weeks of feeling hunted, of discovering new violations, nearly every day, the knowledge that she was in police custody provided our first genuine moment of relief. "It's not over," Daniel cautioned as we separated. "The legal process will be lengthy, and her attorneys will fight every charge, but at least the immediate threat has been contained. And tomorrow, we tell our story publicly," I added. "Establish our narrative before she can spin this arrest as some sort of misunderstanding or overreaction." As we finished preparing our simple dinner, however, the satellite phone rang yet again. This time, the display showed unknown number. After our experience with the fake call from Richard, we approached with caution, Daniel answering, but not immediately identifying himself. "Hello?" "Daniel." The voice was instantly recognizable. Veronica Phillips, Eleanor's sister. "Thank God I reached you. Have you heard about your mother?" "If you mean her arrest, yes, we've been informed," Daniel replied coolly. "How did you get this number, Aunt Veronica? It's supposed to be secure." "Richard gave it to me," she said dismissively. "Listen, this situation has spiraled completely out of control. Your mother made mistakes, serious ones, but criminal charges? Public humiliation? Is that really necessary?" "I didn't initiate criminal charges, Aunt Veronica. Law enforcement did, based on evidence of multiple serious crimes. And yes, it was absolutely necessary. My mother was planning to have me abducted under the guise of medical intervention." "Don't be so dramatic," Veronica scoffed. "Eleanor was concerned about your well-being, perhaps overzealous in her methods, but her intentions were protective, not malicious." "Protective?" Daniel's voice rose in disbelief. "She installed cameras in our bedroom. She stalked my wife for years. She fabricated a psychological evaluation to have me declared incompetent. She hired private security operatives to plan what amounts to a kidnapping. How exactly are those actions protective?" Veronica sighed heavily. "You're not seeing the bigger picture, Daniel. Eleanor has devoted her life to preserving and enhancing the Mitchell legacy. Everything she's done, every decision, every sacrifice, was in service to that responsibility. When she perceived Jessica as a threat to that legacy, she responded, the only way she knew how, by trying to protect what generations of Mitchells have built. The justification was so breathtakingly callous that for a moment, neither Daniel nor I could respond. In Veronica's worldview, presumably shared by Eleanor, the Mitchell family name and fortune were so sacred that any action taken to protect them was inherently justified, no matter how invasive, unethical, or illegal. "The Mitchell legacy isn't a living being," Daniel finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "It doesn't feel pain. It doesn't have rights. It doesn't deserve protection at the expense of actual people's lives and happiness. My wife and I are real people who have been harmed in very real ways by my mother's actions." "Your mother is also a real person," Veronica countered. "A 70-year-old woman now facing public disgrace and potential imprisonment. Is that what you want? To see Eleanor spend her remaining years in prison because she loved you too much, too possessively?" The emotional manipulation was masterful, shifting blame to Daniel, recasting Eleanor as a victim of her own maternal devotion rather than a perpetrator of calculated harassment and psychological warfare. "What I want," Daniel replied evenly, "is for my wife and me to live our lives without constant surveillance, without legal attacks, without fear that one day we'll be separated by force because my mother disapproves of our marriage. If criminal consequences are what it takes to ensure that safety, then yes, I want Eleanor to face those consequences," Judge Harris asked. Eleanor straightened her shoulders, dignity intact despite the orange jumpsuit. "I acted out of love for my son and concern for our family legacy," she said, her voice steady. "I believed Jessica was not the right partner for Daniel, not from our world, not equipped to handle the responsibilities that come with the Mitchell name. I was protecting what generations had built. She paused, gaze still fixed on me. I recognize now that my methods crossed boundaries of legality and privacy. For that, I accept the court's judgment. But I maintain that my underlying concern was valid, even if my actions were not. It wasn't an apology. Eleanor Mitchell didn't do apologies. But it was perhaps the closest thing to acknowledgement we would ever receive. Rebuilding our lives after the chaos has been a gradual process. We sold our house in Lakeside, too tainted by memories of invasion and surveillance to ever feel truly safe again. The buyers, ironically, were attracted by the comprehensive security system Daniel had installed during the ordeal. We relocated to a small community on the Oregon coast, where the constant rhythm of waves against the shore provides a soothing backdrop to our healing. Daniel established his own software consultancy, deliberately small-scale and selective with clients. I found a teaching position at the local elementary school, grateful for colleagues who knew me only as Jessica Mitchell, not as the woman from that sensational surveillance case. The Mitchell family largely disowned Daniel after Eleanor's conviction, with few exceptions. Uncle Richard maintains cautious contact, navigating the delicate balance between family loyalty and recognition of Eleanor's wrongdoing. He sends birthday and Christmas cards, occasionally calls with carefully neutral updates about family matters. Last month, a certified letter arrived from a Boston law firm. Daniel's grandfather's trust had completed its administrative review and determined that regardless of family conflicts, the terms of the trust were legally binding. Daniel's inheritance, substantial though not comparable to the full Mitchell fortune, was being released to him with formal apologies for the delay. Blood is still thicker than water in some ways, Daniel mused as we sat on our deck overlooking the Pacific, the trust documents spread before us. Even if it's just legal obligation rather than genuine reconciliation. Yesterday, as we walked along the beach at sunset, Daniel stopped suddenly, taking both my hands in his. "Would you do it all again?" he asked, his expression serious. Knowing everything that would happen, the surveillance, the threats, the public exposure, would you still choose this life with me? I looked out at the ocean, considering the question honestly. The past year had fundamentally changed us both, left scars visible and invisible. Yet standing there with the man who had chosen me over family fortune, over generational expectations, over the considerable force of Eleanor Mitchell's will, I felt a certainty that transcended our trauma. "Yes," I said simply. "Every difficult moment led us here, to this beach, to this life we're building on our own terms. I'd choose you, choose us, every time." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this peaceful shore. Eleanor had installed those cameras intending to destroy our marriage. Instead, she had inadvertently forged it into something stronger than either of us could have imagined. A bond tested by fire and found unbreakable. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.